Immediately after an explosion at a hospital in Gaza City, several things happened. To start, hundreds of people died. Blame was cast in multiple directions. Then there was international condemnation and protest.
Protests have erupted in the West Bank and in Jordan, where security forces used tear gas to disperse crowds of protesters trying to storm the Israeli embassy. At the UN, the Palestinian ambassador blamed Israel for the hospital explosion and demanded an end to hostilities.
Finally, Biden's visit to a war zone. He arrived in Israel today. This affects him too.
The president's meeting with Arab leaders in Jordan has been called off.
Let's go through all of it one by one, starting with the blast itself. The New York Times verified this video of a fiery impact on hospital grounds. The Al-Khali Al-Mohammadani Hospital is in Gaza City, which, you may recall, Israel ordered evacuated last Friday. The entire city told to flee south. But Hamas told its people to stay. And according to Gazan authorities, thousands did in that one hospital compound alone. This hospital has been hit before. On Saturday, its diagnostic cancer treatment center was hit by rocket fire. 2 upper floors severely damaged, 4 staff members injured. In this most recent explosion, no one knows exactly how many people died, but health authorities say it's hundreds, which by all accounts makes this the single greatest loss of life we have seen since Israeli bombardments began.
One of my colleagues, a surgeon, doctor, was in that hospital when the airstrike hit, and he had this to say: "We were operating in the hospital. There was a strong explosion, and the ceiling fell on the operating room. This is a massacre."
This brings the overall Palestinian death toll now to more than 3,000, with at least 4 times that many injured. Now, let's be very careful with this question of blame, because the truth is, it's impossible at this point for any news organization to independently verify any claim on either side. But in the interest of transparency, I'll share with you what the claims are. So, Hamas almost immediately claimed that this was an Israeli missile attack, an airstrike. This got a lot of traction quickly. But within hours, Israel said the attack was actually a malfunctioning rocket fired by the enemy.
Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza.
It's also posted an audio recording in Arabic, which it says captures 2 people on the ground in Gaza discussing the impact and realizing that the rocket came from Gaza and was misfired. Now, we haven't verified that recording. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which operates in Gaza and took part in the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, it denies being involved. But the IDF says failed rocket attacks within Gaza are common and says it's counted more than 400 of them so far since the war began.
These are failed launches during this war. Until now, these are all failed launches that failed inside the Gaza Strip.
But the U.S. so far agrees with Israel's assessment. It cites its own intel, including infrared satellite data showing the rocket did not come from Israeli positions. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad, accused of misfiring on the hospital, denies being involved. So again, we can't verify the authenticity of the recording. Consider how often hospitals are hit in conflict. The World Health Organization counts 115 attacks on healthcare facilities since this war began. Most hospitals in Gaza, it says, are now non-functional. And Israel's blockade of medical supplies and fuel has crippled the rest. Patients on life support cannot be moved, and those Palestinians who can move often flock to hospitals to escape the bombing. In Beirut, protests erupted outside the U.S. Embassy. Reuters reports tear gas was used. Protesters also showed up outside Israel's embassy in Amman, Jordan, and according to Turkish media, in Istanbul and Ankara as well. Hezbollah in Lebanon called the hospital explosion an Israeli massacre and called for a global day of rage today, the same day of Biden's visit, which looks dramatically different now than planned. Biden was scheduled to visit Jordan for a summit with King Abdullah II. He was also to speak with Egypt's President, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, as well as the president of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas. All three of those trips have been called off, seemingly in response to the Gaza hospital explosion. We don't know to what extent all of this, whether deliberate or accidental, constitutes a red line being crossed in the war. But calls for a ceasefire have increased, and critical life-saving supplies, truckfuls of aid, still sit idle just outside Gaza on the border with Egypt, waiting for the violence to stop.